just believe very passionately that if you're going to take your industry seriously, you need to be engaged, you need to be involved, and you're not going to fight the battles that organizations that have been around a while, have the infrastructure, and very importantly, have the monetary capability to file the litigation when it happens.
A little there at the top from my long talk with the man behind the voice you heard. That would be Western States Trucking Association Director of Government Affairs, Joe Rajkovacz. With a long history in trucking and with the last decade and a half or so with Western States, headquartered in California and among the most prominent actors nationally challenging the onerous parts of the California Air Resources Board's ever more stringent regulations. Rajkovacz was speaking to the value of association membership for business owners in whatever industry they participate in. Specifically, for him, of course, that's trucking. Tracking back to his time as an owner-operator, first in the 1980s and in trucking and other roles before even that, as you'll hear in today's episode highlighting his career. I'm Todd Dills, your host for this final regular edition of Overdrive Radio for the year. And truth be told, I can't fully recall when I met Rajkovacz for the first time in person. It wasn't long after I started working with Overdrive in 2006, though, when he was working for OIDA and had been doing quite a bit of work around the CARB truck and bus regulation, ultimately barring 2006 and earlier engines from being used in the state. His frustration with that rule and what he saw as the association's lack of action around it would ultimately lead him to the Western States Trucking Association, then called the California Construction Trucking Association. It's at Western States where he officially concluded his career, retiring earlier this month, back near where he began his trucking career in Wisconsin with his wife, Joan, the proud parents of 3 grown children, grandparents of 8, and staying warm this winter season, we do hope. When I learned of Joe Rajkovacz's retirement plans earlier in the year, I knew I had to share more of his story with all of you. We conducted the conversation during the long-running annual event where I think I can safely say I got to know Rajkovacz best, the annual conference of the National Association of Small Trucking Companies here in Nashville. He's a perennial presenter there, and odds are will continue to be as his engagement with regulatory and legislative issues on the West Coast for trucking will also be continuing, as you'll hear. Here's Rajkovacz introducing himself to start.
Joe Rajkovacz, Director of Governmental Affairs for the Western States Trucking Association, and my primary responsibilities have been both monitoring state federal legislation and regulations and crafting our responses to that. And over the years, we've had some successes. Like a lot of organizations, we've also had a lot of disappointments, but I always use the analogy that even in Major League Baseball, a 250 hitter is getting a multi-million-dollar contract. You're not always going to hit home runs, but you got to keep swinging the bat.
Joe Rajkovacz's retirement comes following an on-highway career that began before he turned 21. Coming to a conclusion 50-plus years later, just a week or two ago now.
December 13th, going to retire, hanging it up after a career in trucking that began 50 years ago in 1974 when I was in high school, working for a local trucking company in Milwaukee. Started out in the Wash Bay, and everything, was kind of monkey see, monkey do. Next thing here's how you change a tire. And of course, we had inner tubes back in those days. And when I turned 18, began, driving. All we needed was a chauffeur's license. And began driving, big trucks, 130-inch wheelbase cab overs with 45-foot trailers, hauling beer within the state. La Crosse and Flair out of Milwaukee, which it was young and it was exciting.
Exciting, for sure, but it always struck him as odd in those days that he couldn't take that rig across the Mississippi River into Minnesota.
Yeah, I would deliver to a beer distributor in La Crosse, and Yet they could look at that Mississippi River Bridge and couldn't legally cross over to the Crescent, Minnesota without being considered unsafe. And that has always affected my attitude about the prohibition against 18-year-olds. And I know that's very controversial with a lot of drivers. But at the same token, I always say, remember, there are drivers in Texas and California that are able to run. In California, if you run from down by Yuma to the northwestern part of the state, it's well over 1,000 miles just within the state. You have the same kind of dynamic in Texas. They can run all over through some of the most congested urban areas in the United States. And that's where FMCSA has been trying to pull data, and it does surprise me, about the safety histories of drivers under 21. But you even look at a city like Kansas City, right in the middle of the city. You cross into Kansas, you can't literally do that. I just firmly believe that there should be a viable pathway for younger people that are interested in driving a truck, even if it's a graduated system where you've got to meet certain performance standards, instead of just simply saying, hell no. Because you wait for a lot of younger people till 21 and they don't go to college. And increasingly males don't go to college. I mean, there's 65% undergraduate degrees today issued in the United States are going females. Males are opting to do other things. And if they can't go into trucking, they're going after a different profession.
Throughout today's episode, you'll hear more of Joe Rajkovacz's story, no doubt, but also plenty of evidence of what his career represents. For me, he's among the best examples we have of a trucking industry participant who spent the time and did the work to act on something fundamental to the business. Real love for it, and a desire to see conditions for its participants improve for the better. Much more on Joe Rajkovacz's move from intrastate driver to OTR owner-operator to, ultimately, association work to fight so many of those fundamental fights. More, that is, on the other side of a quick break. So keep tuned.
When winter hits hard and the thermometer plunges, your diesel engine needs serious protection. Howe's Diesel Treat is your go-to for preventing fuel gelling and keeping water and deposits out, all while lubricating your fuel system. But if your fuel gels because you forgot to treat or temps drop way below freezing, Howe's Diesel Lifeline is ready to save the day. No need for mixing or filter changes. Both products are guaranteed and warranty safe. Trust Howe's Diesel Treat and Howe's Diesel Lifeline to keep your diesel running strong.
Find more information about the full range of the Howe's company's fuel treatments at HOWES, HOWESproducts.com. Big thanks for their continued support of Overdrive Radio. Now, to get us started, Joe Rajkovacz's answer to the question, was it purely happenstance that he happened to take that work in the wash bay that got him started hauling? Did he have family in trucking in Wisconsin, maybe, where he got his start?
No, my dad's a rocket scientist.
Okay.
He's me, I started, it was summer of 68. I started caddying at a country club outside of Minneapolis. And, I was one of those younger guys who just, was always making money. Mowing lawns, clearing driveways in the winter, paper routes when they existed. It was just always chasing money. And then as a young man, I did definitely have the wanderlust, which is kind of very typical. Getting out to see the country was really appealing. In fact, I had a 2-year stint in law enforcement. That's actually what I went to college for. Okay. Which I dropped out my senior year because I got a job as a cop. And I still, back then we got paid $11,000 a year, basically carry a .357 Magnum. And so I moonlit on my 2- and 3-day weekends hauling beer still. I kept doing that because with $11,000 a year, you're going no place, I met in 81. A good friend of mine was a Schneider Transport union driver. This is when they were the largest union truckload motor carrier. And back then, Schneider had safety banquets, throughout their entire operation system, And, they had boards in Indiana and Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Wisconsin. They had 8 different locations that drivers were domiciled out of. Anyhow, I ran into A.J. Schneider. His date backed out, and he knew what I was doing, moonlighting on weekends, still driving a truck. He goes, "Hey, Joe, you want to go, with me down to the safety banquet at the Sheridan in Madison?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" I was off, and I ended up that night having drinks with A.J. Schneider. And it was really interesting that, I never gave him any of my, we're just talking, right? And about 2 weeks later, I get this letter at my apartment, and it was offering a position as a driver with Schneider. Now, here's the thing. At that time, just in those days post-deregulation, it was still a damn good job. The guys were basically making almost $40,000 a year back then, and I was at $11,000 as a cop. Not married, no family, the wanderlust. I took the jump.
Right.
My brother, my kid brother, is 8 years my junior, still remembers how I took him to the Chevy dealer in a suburb of Milwaukee to buy my new '84 Chevy Silverado, counting out $100 bills, to buy the thing. It was 25 at the time, And it's how I met my wife, moving to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we've had a wonderful life. Three really wonderful kids, all in public service. Daughters, a Navy F-18 fighter pilot. She's the first one of 2 females to be instructors at Top Gun in naval history.
That's cool, man.
She's a Top Gun graduate. So.
And the other 2. And there's a boy in there.
Yeah, my son, my oldest son, he's Air Force. Okay. He's over 20 years in the Air Force. He just literally last week got back from the Middle East on another deployment. He's got 5 or 8 grandchildren he and his wife have blessed us with. And it's something I'm aware of with two of my 2 kids that are in the service, as they're into their mid and even late 30s. They've been at war. My son went in 2005, 3 days after high school, and all they've known is war, and they're tired of it. I can tell you that. I can absolutely say that for all the smack talk about younger people, my wife and I have been very blessed to see a side. I always have to check myself to see a side of younger people that is just amazing. The world that a lot of people think is gone, it's still there. Our middle daughter is in her 11th year. She and her husband both are special needs teachers in the public school system in Wisconsin.
Back to the early 1980s, where Joe Rajkovacz's work as a union driver with Schneider would soon give way to another sort of trucking as a small business owner.
In that short period of time, 3 years' time, I get a kick out of listening to, a lot of the smack talk, pro and anti-union. I've never been anti-union. You want to be a Teamster, have at it. I think the world was a better place when the Teamsters really represented. I mean, I look at what I made as a young man and the benefits, etc. I wish I would have been able to keep that my whole career, to tell you the truth. But the reality was, I always tell people, if you want to know what happened to Teamsters, watch the movie Casino with Joe Pesci, etc. You can actually look it up. Back then, the Teamsters were corrupt as hell. Under the Reagan administration, Central States pension plan was put in federal court receivership. It was, I got the documents at that time. I was a Teamster. When they got cut off from, and this is my historical view of what transpired, when they got cut off from access to that pension money, the only thing they could do is raise more dues money. So what they did is they cut one of the first paper deals with Schneider that created what were called special services, SSD drivers. They were Teamsters in paying dues only. There were no Teamster benefits attached to them. No health and welfare. It was all company sponsored. That was the beginning of this company called Schneider National today. And, it is what it is. I think it's still a great company. I do. But the historical part of how the Teamsters really mismanaged themselves impacted my life. And I was sitting there as a Teamster driver, and I was getting dispatched around. And the object was to get us union drivers to quit. And I was sitting there going, I'm not playing this game. I'd go to Detroit from Green Bay and then be told to sit a day. And they'd always move you before you got to that point where they would have to pay you layover pay. It was a big game. And at any rate, I decided, hey, I'm going to go buy my first truck. And that's what I did. I made a lot more money, contrary to what the Teamsters tried to say today, that being an owner-operator means you can't find two nickels to rub together. There are a lot in trucking that try to run with that, and I always made money. In fact, everybody I know in northern Wisconsin made money. And, there were people who made bad decisions, and, they didn't, but that's the risk you take when you decide to go out on your own. There are going to be some that don't make it, and I'm not a real fan of those who go crying to the government to protect them from themselves for their own decisions. And we've got a lot of that going on.
His second truck was a beautiful 1986 Ford CLT 9000 cab-over, powered by a B-model Cat, the rig you see on the podcast cover image for this edition. Rajkovacz is pictured there with his wife, Joan, and their firstborn, John. He'd be an owner-operator then for the 3 decades following. And those early experiences in law enforcement and all the ongoing trucking experience would lead him directly to recognizing the value of association membership, a central part of the most recent decade and more in his career.
My total driving career was just shy of 30 years. What happened in the late 80s was Elizabeth Dole was transportation secretary. And she signed, this is before random drug and alcohol testing for all truck drivers, and she signed on to a project where 4 states, I know it was Utah and Nebraska in particular, I forget what the other 2 states were. It was a program that, a random program, totally unconstitutional, that pulled we truck drivers over. I was running the West Coast then, would pull us over, and law enforcement would demand we give up physical evidence to essentially see the prevalence of drug and alcohol use in the industry. It was with no probable cause. And keep in mind, I had a law enforcement background. Yeah. I knew it wasn't legal. If I had done that as a cop, I would be sitting in jail today.
It was a data collection effort.
It was a data collection effort. And I got pulled over outside Chadron, Nebraska on US 20 by a Nebraska trooper and was told to take a PBT test without any probable cause. And we argued, and I was threatened about being taken to jail. A good friend of mine from Nebraska did go to jail over this. And I just says, let's go. And that's one of the reasons I've always had this attitude on, for instance, illegal search and seizure involving commercial motor vehicles. I listen to all these lawyers go, well, you got to go along with it. No, I've never believed that. I believe you're a free person in a free society. If you don't stand up for your rights, who the hell is going to? And so I absolutely stuck to my guns, and then it was interesting. The trooper just says, you know what, get out of here. And I looked at him and says, what? He says, because I told him, I said, I'm a cop. What you're asking me to do is unconstitutional. He just said, I'm just going to dummy up the paperwork. I still remember that. And the reason I bring that all up, Todd, is that's when I realized I needed to be part of an organization that could actually fight the fights I couldn't fight myself. As an individual, I was powerless. And at that time, I joined OOIDA. And interestingly, they filed litigation challenging that pilot program.
That one, okay.
They did. And a good friend of mine was one of the named plaintiffs, the one who got, Anyhow, shortly thereafter, after that was filed, the feds said, well, we got enough data. They ended the program. The federal judge, and I've always viewed this as very corrupt, said, well, the case is moot. The feds got away with violating people's constitutional rights. You know something I know? When I was a cop, if I violated your constitutional rights, you could come after me, and it didn't matter that I quit violating your constitutional rights. But the big deal was that OOIDA was really, the Teamsters weren't going after anybody. It was OOIDA under Jim Johnston that went after the feds on that. And I still remember my membership number, 6810 in those days, and it was done, on a ledger sequentially. Yeah. And, it was one of the things that stuck with me. I always believed in being a part of an organization. I just didn't know where. Yeah. And as I retire now, Todd, the thing I truly believe, of course, I've been involved. I was, eventually, well over a decade later, we got on the board of directors at OIDA. And 06 is when I came off the road, went to work full-time for OIDA. And it was because of my involvement and engagement with the association. And, I'm with Western, the last 12 and a half years, I've been with Western States Trucking Association. And I do hear this from many drivers, small businesses. They don't do anything. I can't tell you how many calls I get. Well, if you do this for me, I'll join you. Okay, that doesn't get my attention at all. If I did that, it would just be an endless cycle of doing work for people. But I truly believe, I don't care if, there's only a limited number of legitimate associations out there. Even, state associations. I'm not anti-state associations, even though they're allied with the ATA, because I'm going to let you in a dirty little secret. They're not always representing their memberships, and most of the states are made up of smaller carriers. Yeah. So I just believe very passionately that if you're going to take your industry seriously, you need to be engaged, you need to be involved, and you're not going to fight the battles that organizations that have been around a while, have the infrastructure, and very importantly, have the monetary capability to file the litigation when it happens, because it does. Not everything ends up in litigation. We have, for instance, 4 lawsuits right now challenging both U.S. EPA and California Air Resources.
Proof is in the pudding, as they say. The Western States Trucking Association's CARB-related litigation has seen some narrow success of late, as regular Overdrive readers may well recall, related to the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, which is still awaiting a waiver from the EPA in order to be enforced. The association, Rajkovacz noted during our talk, through litigation had been able to ensure no retroactive enforcement of provisions of the rule, and more.
We've got retroactive enforcement. It's gone. We got them to rescind their common control guidance. that essentially would have expanded the rules of farm underground regulation to not just the targeted fleets of 50 or more trucks, 50 million or more dollars in annual revenues, but would have taken, say, a broker. You can name any number of brokers. Oh, you use more than 50 trucks, you have control.
Operators, yeah, right, sure.
There's the thing about smaller businesses. They may use a lot of different brokers, but I know in my own experience, if you get in the stable of a really good broker, you stay in that stable.
Sure.
And that would be a common control that CARB would look at, that you basically haul for the same person. Imagine contracting with a major shipper. You contract direct with them. They're well over $50 million. CARB's attitude would have been, well, that's common control. We got that to go away. Doesn't mean they won't play games in the future, because there's one thing I've learned about environmental activists, both inside and outside the government. They don't care. They just keep coming back again and again and again.
For recipients of the Western States Trucking Association's weekly newsletter and readers of its regulatory updates in the magazine, know that though Rajkovacz is stepping back from the government affairs director role there, he's not stepping away entirely.
Todd, I can only watch so many Jerry Springer reruns before I get bored. And, I don't intend on spending my life sitting on a couch watching Fox News all day. It's not going to happen. I'm going to continue to do some work, do our quarterly magazine that you can read online. I put about 95% of it together. If you read it and you find the punctuation spelling mistakes, I have found them. It's funny every time it goes to print. We still do a print magazine. And when I'm reading that, I go, how the hell did I miss that? And early on in my career there, I would hear from members, because there are people out there who spelling and punctuation freaks, and they'll let you know.
Yeah.
Heck, I've let you guys know, hey, Todd, look at the title to this. It's jacked up. And it happens.
It happens to us.
But I'll be doing that, our weekly newsletter, and maybe some other things. But it's just time to move on and slow the pace of life down. And got 8 grandchildren now. My wife spends a lot of time with them, and me, I'm still in the work mode, and it is interesting. I do see that you do slow down. There's a lot of denial about that as you age, and our executive director will be retiring next year in October. And we just had our annual membership meeting, and the executive committee is going to be forming a headhunting. They want to expand it nationally. So, there's certainly some people that we all have in mind that they should look at, but associations with what's going on right now in the industry, I do have a real streak of pessimism. It's the environmental regulation's a big thing. We're going to have to see some moderation on that. Otherwise, I happen to be somebody who totally believes that if we're not able to moderate these requirements, it'll be, in many respects, the end of small businesses and owner-operators. I see with our members the invoices for electric trucks. And it's not what a lot of the media tells you. $600,000. And that's not including, the charging station on your property if you can get it. And then everybody wants to pay you the same rate. You get no cost recovery in the supply chain. The feds in the state of California need to become fuel agnostic.
Sure.
They're not there yet.
Right.
we shall see what happens. But I'm aware, as I deal with a lot of it. I know you've done a whole series over the years on like CSA. I'm seeing what should be regarded as nitpicky inspections. Literally just dealt with it with one member where they have one bad inspection and they get notified that they're losing their insurance. I see that a lot. And the insurance markets are literally so risk adverse, and they're not understanding. I could care less if you got your fire extinguisher rolling around in your side box if it still shows fully charged. The reality is, and I trucked for 30 years, that little fire extinguisher ain't putting out crap if you have an electrical fire or the diesel goes up. But people get written up for stuff like that, and it has nothing to do with highway safety. And yet the net effect, because of how safety is being tracked, is that people are losing their insurance and become uninsurable, or the rates that they want. We get people new authority, and I always tell them it's tough to shop legit insurance till you have your DOT number. And then they do. They put the investment into that. I get people telling me insurance companies want $40,000 and $50,000 for one truck now. All the time I'm hearing that, and I'm like, you can't do it. You'll go bankrupt. There's some real challenges to small business trucking. It's not just coming from one area.
The end was in the beginning here, ultimately, as the story of Joe Rajkovacz's life has been one of working to overcome those challenges in so many ways. From his own business in his early years trucking in the 1980s as an owner-operator to now decades of association involvement. His message to all the business owners coming up behind him is born out of his experience, as he urges similar involvement in ways large and small. It will be your work that will be the determinative factor in helping face off and overcome the headwinds.
If you want to be a part of the industry long term, you got to have somebody swinging a baseball bat for you. And by the way, even get involved. You get involved in the one thing I learned, keep your excitement in check. You need, if you get involved, you need to pay attention, listen. It doesn't mean you can't comment, but some things you may think you probably need to keep to yourself. I learned that lesson a little too late, but I did learn it. So when you come off the road, you have a very raw way of looking at things. And of course, I say a lot of things people don't even hear. It ain't never going public, and truckers have a very blunt way of putting things. And my wife has probably been the biggest influence on that behavior with me. I'll never forget what she told me. She says, Joe, you could convince more people about your position if you didn't verbally go for their throat right off the bat.
Hats off to you, Joe. Stay warm in Wisconsin, my friend. You can find the Western States Trucking Association and subscribe to that weekly newsletter of theirs I mentioned at weststruck.org. That's spelled WESTRK.org. Weststruck. WESTRK.org. I'll post a link to it in the post that houses this podcast for December 23, 2024 at overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio. Likewise in the show notes for the episode, wherever you're listening. Overdrive Radio is on Spotify and SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts and YouTube, Overdrive's Facebook page, and any listening platform, really. Leave us a review there if you're enjoying these, and big thanks in advance for that. Next week, we'll dive back through some of the biggest stories of the year in our annual Year in Review, counting down to 2025, so keep tuned. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. It's edited and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker-songwriter Long Haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis, the Snake Man himself, Wemmick. Terry Two Socks Richardson on bass, keys by Tisha Mingo, Jim Whitehead, and on drums, Andrew Marshall. The podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's own social media coordinator, Jasmine Campbell, news editor Matt Cole, executive editor Alex Lockie, and video editors Lawson Rudisell and Andrew Gwynn. See you next time.